I'm Nikki. I've been coming to this church since my Uncle Rob actually moved from California, so he's going here for a really long time. One of the bondages that the enemy holds on us is shame. And it has been years since I came to be in the place I am now, but I'm going to go back. And this is me releasing that shame. So my journey to motherhood actually started before my sweet Libby was in my belly. Christmas morning 2012, I experienced a miscarriage while opening up presents of baby clothes at my excited in-laws' house. One of the most devastating moments of my life. The emotional ride that followed started the rift between my husband and myself. Without dealing with it and facing the pain and loss, we found ourselves pregnant again. I did all I could to keep it secret, except I told my mom at Walmart, which I'll never forget. But I didn't want people to know so I could avoid that familiar shame of something tragic were to happen again. I became obsessive, overly cautious, and careful about all things related to baby, while my husband dove further into substance abuse and away from me. I felt utterly alone as a newly pregnant woman, still hurting from the loss on Christmas, but a voice inside me urged me to trust God for this plan for the life growing inside of my belly. Well, 7 months later, a true modern miracle, and a long story for another time, led to the discovery of a tumor in the baby in my belly. It wasn't there at the 20-week scan, and I couldn't even process the meetings that followed. I had ultrasounds every week until she was born to determine if they needed to induce and operate on her or operate on her while she was still inside of me. The emotional toll was catastrophic, and I felt ashamed again. And above all else, my marriage continued to crumble as my husband fell apart. Sweet Libby made it until her due date. Super healthy baby. And on New Year's Day, we held our little miracle at last. My husband was amazing that day, my rock and support as we went through the journey of childbirth together. That was the man I married, but almost immediately he went back to self-medicating, and I was alone in the marriage again. We both just tucked in all our pain inside and self-medicated. Then around Valentine's Day, my sweet Libby, at a month and a half years old, had surgery that successfully removed her neuroblastoma cancer, and my husband became a stranger. My heart and emotions were pulled too tightly in opposite directions. This was my dark period. I didn't think I deserved Libby because she was such a miracle, and I was falling apart. But something in me said God had a plan. And not once did I never not pray. I got a call from my aunt about the church opening up a cafe and needing help. She knew that I had 2 years cafe experience and that the job that I was at was only contributing to my anxiety and depression as my husband was my boss. It was a necessary and humbling moment for me because I felt that I was done with that type of service job. I'd done it for years. But my heart said to trust God. I needed to be there. I needed to be around people who loved me and who cared about my well-being, and they didn't judge me. My aunt was the most amazing mentor. What she did for me, I can never repay, but I love you. So I worked at the cafe while I restarted, and I redirected my life. The cafe provided me with the way out of the position that I was in, that I had been praying for. And my short time at the cafe actually introduced me to my new boss, and I am a full-time media buyer, now advertising for 2 years now. After further prayer and personal work with God, I filed for divorce. God knew that even though I deeply loved my husband, I needed to let him go, so God could work on us both, and he did. I love myself now. My sweet daughter had her last cancer follow-up in April, and I have the most amazing relationship with my ex-husband's family. That's God. Libby's daddy is also doing well. I trusted, let go, kept faith, and practiced self-discipline. The cafe was a bridge from that bad situation to my new job and my better life. I am happy. I'm happy as a single divorced mom. This was my greatest fear at one time in my life, and that's God. And praise Jesus, because I would do it all again, in the exact same way. To be the mom and the woman I am now, and to know God like I do. That's a blessing. Only God can take us out of our darkness into the light and make our biggest fears and weaknesses into our sources of triumph and strength. There's nothing that I love more than being a mom to my miracle child. My own mom is the best mom in the world to me. It makes my heart sing to know how proud she is of me. She tells me all the time, our God is so, so good. Happy Mother's Day.
And Nikki, I don't know that for a bunch of us who've been on this ride a long time, when we started this cafe, we thought, well, we're just going to help people who are down and out and broken. And no one ever kind of realizes or thinks, what if it's my own family? And, my niece rises one day, and in a very dark time, you heard her testimony, a very dark time of her own life, she's like, I'll help you guys get this cafe going because I have the skills and I need it. And you've heard the journey of how her and Tanya and maybe one other helped start this thing and get it going, and God used you greatly and is still using you greatly, and I'm inspired by your story. It makes us remember, oh yeah, why did we build this church? Why do we do this? Why are we gathered here today? What is the point of all of it? I've been reflecting on that a lot because typically Mother's Day is the third largest attended church service day in the calendar year. I don't know if you know that. Christmas, Easter, and Mother's Day. Always the three biggies. So most churches pull out all the stops on Mother's Day, and it's a big, huge outreach. I read one church locally is giving away $1,500 of stuff today on Mother's Day to people who come in. I guess now you're thinking you picked the wrong church. Hey, I ain't gonna get, where was that? Get my keys, get going. I'll drive over there now. Yeah, that ain't us. That ain't us. No, I just think that, we're kind of like looking at this thing, we're just this group of people who are trying to figure out how to love Jesus first and then love each other as a result with all of our stuff, right? That's what we try to figure out. This last week, I was really appreciative of Brenda, who was also a person who'd worked in our cafe for a while. Brenda actually came to us through Union Gospel Mission. She was living at their Anna Ogden Hall, and she had been through the ringer in life when her teenage son tragically died just a couple years ago. And out of that tragedy, her whole life fell apart. She found herself eventually living at the mission, and she came to work for us. She had to do a sense of 200 hours of, a work project, and she had a dream in her life to eventually launch her own coffee shop. So since we're good friends with Union Gospel Mission, they sent her our way, and she worked for us for many, many weeks. And she's moved on since to do other things, but every once in a while we have her come back and cover a shift for us, just because we like her and we still want to keep up with her life. And this last week, just a few days ago, she came and worked a shift, and when it was done, she posted on our Gathering House Facebook page. I have a quip there. It says, she said, I love, in all capital letters, working for the Gathering House. It feels so good to serve such an amazing community of God, loving people. They keep me grounded and focused on His plan and not mine. Thank you, Tanya and Rob. Tanya runs the coffee shop. For such an amazing chapter in my life. You rock. And in those moments like that, they just touch my heart. It's like, yeah, that's what it was all about, right? It's all about seeing Jesus work in the lives and hearts of people and transforming people from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of light. That same day when I was reading her little quip to us of it. It was kind of a cheer for us and giving us a 5-star review on Yelp. I ran across an article by a girl named Nikki Lima. Kimberly was a viral blogger. She just blogged, and she had this one article that just went huge because her husband died this past February. And I thought of the ironies of our kind of purpose-filled coffee shop because her article was entitled, "The Church Doesn't Need Another Coffee Shop." So I remember I opened it up to say, what's this about? And here's what she said, part of what she said. My husband endured cycle after cycle of chemo. He was separated from his children many nights. He was hooked up to chemo for 24 hours at a time. He listened to the doctors tell him how bad news after bad news. He was left paralyzed, unable to get out of bed. And he never said how much he appreciated the coffee bar at church. Never once did he say he loved the lighting in the sanctuary. He never told me how cool it was that churches were putting couches on the platform. He didn't boast of the graphics and props on the platform. He talked about Jesus. He quoted scriptures. He reminded me of sermons we had heard. And in the middle of the night, he sang songs of praise and worship to God, and he spent his time praying. Because nothing a church does to strategize to bring in members helps you in the time of the storm. It is only Jesus. I don't have my best friend with me anymore, and even though I take comfort in knowing he's in heaven, I can't talk to my husband. I can't text him during the day. I can't share with him my frustrations. I can't hold his hand. I can't hug him. I can't kiss him. He is not there. And as I drive to church during the week, I'm not thinking that I am so glad the leadership are reading How to Grow Your Church books and adopting cool sermon series. I'm thinking how desperately I need Jesus. I scroll down my social media feed and I see churches with pictures of their coffee bars, their concert-like settings, their graphics, their trendy sermon series, and those don't appeal to me. I want to see how Jesus has changed a person's life. I want to see the power of prayer. I want to see how the Word of God can be applied to one's life. I want to see how Jesus can help the hurting. I want to see how Jesus can heal the sick. I want to see how the broken heart was restored. I want to see how the mourners were comforted. I want to see how lives were restored. She didn't know her article would go so big. It went viral. Thousands upon thousands of people would read it and share their own thoughts and connect their own stories. It made her have to write out an addendum to it later on where she said, I just need to clarify that my church did support me. They did come and pray. They were there with me. She said, and I realize now, as after writing this blog in a time of grief, that a lot of other people have been to churches in their time of grief in the storm when no one was there for them. They'd done the service. They'd been to the churches. They had tried it, but no one was there for them. And I wonder on this Mother's Day, what is it we are all looking for in church? Because for us who've been on a journey at the Gathering House a long time, see, we were formerly First Covenant Church downtown, working with poor people in the street, and everybody said, that's a great job. That's what Jesus would do if He was here. Yeah, the church should do that, but they weren't going to come to that church. Big old brick church downtown on the corner of 2nd and Division in the heart of poverty culture. Yeah, people weren't going to come to that, and they didn't come to it. So we were on the side of the coin that says, well, what do you have to do to get people to come? And we've been on the other side of the coin looking at what should we do, what ought we do. We all have one thing we agree on. If Jesus doesn't show up, nothing's worthwhile. If Jesus isn't there, and let me tell you, I've been in big churches. I was an assistant pastor at a 2,000-member church in California for a long time, for many years. And there were times I'd walk out of church on that Sunday after we put on the big show, and I would wonder to myself, I wonder where Jesus went to church today, because it didn't feel like He was here. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. We're all looking for Jesus. We're all looking for, when does He change my life? I do agree with Kimberly in the sense that I'm looking for, when does He restore? When does He heal? When does He bring about transformative change? What good is all the other stuff if Jesus ain't showing up? So I've been thinking about that a lot and wrestling with that. And recently I was reading Colossians chapter 1, and I stumbled across a version of Colossians chapter 1 in the Message. And I love what this says. Does it boil down the essence of what we're all about as church. I love it because when the Apostle Paul wrote to the Colossian church, Colossae was a city in modern day, what is modern day Turkey, but at the time it was called Asia Minor. It was the kind of the center of culture and world and art of the Roman Empire times. And the people in that city had they'd fallen in love with Jesus. They began to follow Him. But then they also began to say, well, we could adopt other things too. I mean, it's Jesus and. It's Jesus and some of the pagan Roman gods. It's Jesus and some of the Mideastern gods. It's Jesus and. And Jesus began to blend in with all the other religious views. It's like, they're all pretty much the same anyway, right? Like we here in America today. And so Paul wrote this letter to them, making sure that they understood, oh no, it's not Jesus and. Jesus isn't an addition to your religious views. Jesus is the center of everything you need to believe, and here's why. And through the power of the Holy Spirit speaking through him, he wrote these words to the Colossians as translated by Eugene Peterson's The Message. God rescued us from dead-end alleys and dark dungeons. He set us up in the kingdom of the Son he loved so much, the Son who got us out of the pit we were in, got rid of the sins we were doomed to keep repeating. We look at this Son and we see the God who cannot be seen. We look at this Son and we see God's original purpose in everything created, for everything, absolutely everything, above and below, visible and invisible, rank after rank after rank of angels, everything got started in Him and find its purpose in Him. He was there before any of it came into existence, and He holds it all together right up to this moment. And when it comes to the church, He organizes and holds it together like a head does a body. He was supreme in the beginning, and leading the resurrection parade, He is supreme in the end. From beginning to end, He's there, towering far above everything, everyone. So spacious is He, so roomy, that everything of God finds its proper place in Him without crowding. Not only that, but all the broken and dislocated pieces of the universe, people and things, animals and atoms, get properly fixed and fit together in vibrant harmonies, all because of His death, His blood that poured down from the cross. And you yourselves are a case study of what He does. At one time, you all had your backs turned to God, thinking rebellious thoughts of Him, giving Him trouble every chance you got. But now, by giving Himself completely at the cross, actually dying for you, Christ brought you over to God's side and put your lives together whole and holy in His presence. You don't walk away from a gift like that. You stay grounded and steady in the bond of trust, constantly tuned into the message, careful not to be distracted or diverted. There is no other message, just this one. Every creature under heaven gets this same message, and I, Paul, am a messenger of this message. If you want to know what Christianity is, there it is. In a nutshell, it's Jesus and more Jesus. Jesus above, Jesus below, Jesus on the right, Jesus on the left, Jesus in front, Jesus in back, Jesus holding it together, Jesus at the beginning of time, Jesus at the end of time, Jesus rewarding you, Jesus holding you together, Jesus pulling you out of darkness, putting you to a light, Jesus, it's all Jesus all the time. That's it. And when we gather, it's like, yeah, that's who we come to worship. The Jesus who is, who was, and who is to come. The one who died, who gave Himself freely for us. The one who opened the doors to the Father for that. That's what church is all about. And yet somehow on this side, we always find that, well, how do we encounter Him? How do we encounter Jesus? It's like, I hear that, but how do I personally touch base with Jesus? And there's really two ways. There's directly. Directly means when you pick up His Word and you're reading the Bible, He will speak to you straight to that Word, just to you in your life. He'll touch you. He'll start opening up your mind and your heart to see and understand. That's a direct way. The other is through the power of His Holy Spirit. He can just adapt to your life, speak to you in your mind, talk to you about what's going on. And why you need to know His Word is because we have a lot of other voices in our minds too, right? We're like FM radios, dialing along. Like we can hear all kinds of different stations. We got to figure out how to tune in the voice of Jesus because we got radio and TV and advertising and we got our history and we've got our moms and our dads' voices and all these other voices that play out in our minds. It's like we got to dial ourselves into Jesus. You dial yourself in by knowing His Word and what He sounds like. And you go, oh, that's my station. That's Jesus. When you're tuning the radio in and you hear someone say, welcome, good to have you here today on this fine Sunday morning. You're like, oh, I'm on the talk radio show. It's going to give me some smooth jazz. Right? And when you hear someone, screaming and yelling at you with a little bit of a southern accent, it's probably going to be playing country music pretty quick, right? You know the voice. You know the sounds. You know the intonations, right? Yeah, you need to tune into the voice of Jesus. He can talk to you directly. The other way we get in contact with Jesus is indirectly. And the indirectly is when He pours His Spirit into other people who are following Him, and then He uses us to touch others. And when He uses us and what we've learned about Him to love and be His hands and feet and be His spoken word and be His eyes and be His ears and be in the arms that hug and be in the people who meet needs, it's like that's Jesus doing it. And it's the indirect stuff that always confuses us. That's where we try to figure it all out. Having Jesus speak directly, I'm game. The indirect stuff is where we all try to figure out, how does this whole thing work? What can we do? What is the way I can carry Jesus' message of love to others? And when we get together as a church, every single church I've ever been in, and I've been in quite a few of them, and every single church I know about, they're all sitting down thinking the same thing. How do we get people to hear this message of love we just shared? How do we get people to understand this gospel of Jesus Christ? How does it we can help people understand the great purpose and meaning of the universe is all Jesus all the time? How do we get them to come to hear the message? And that's when we start going, I don't know, maybe on Mother's Day we give away $1,500 worth of stuff. I don't know. Is it wrong? Probably not. If someone comes and hears about Jesus, is that great? Probably. Churches do car shows. People do concerts. Recently, I was in a grant writing conference in Kansas City, and I met this African-American pastor named Pastor Mack. I think I got a picture of his church right here from Grace Community Covenant Church. Pastor Mack and I, we went out and we had great Southern barbecue in Kansas City. And let me tell you, you have not had ribs till you've been to Kansas City. You go to Kansas City, you can get some of the best ribs on the planet. So he and I were in these divey little joints, eating ribs and talking about his ministry. He's in Louisville, Kentucky, and he's in a neighborhood which is the poorest of the poor, where the vast majority of homes don't have a dad because dads are in jail. Their dropout rate in their high school is 86%. In the local high school right there. 86% dropout. He's got ladies in his church who cannot read or write. They're in their 30s, 40s, 50s. They've been going through life illiterate. And he's trying to put this whole thing together. He's trying to plant a church in this rough and tough and tumble neighborhood in Louisville, Kentucky. And I said, well, how'd you get it going? What's worked? He goes, well, I'll tell you what worked is there's a famous fast food chicken restaurant that I shan't name, but they've been giving us all their chicken when they kind of hit an expiration date. It's still good. And so on Sunday mornings, the mamas of the church would come together and they would cook up this big vats of chicken, and we would just throw in some potato salad that we could pay for, a 3-bean salad or that kind of thing. And we get a couple hundred people to come down, and we'd eat a meal together. And for some of the people, that was their meal for the day, and then we'd do church. And I said, so what happened? He goes, oh, the directors over me, the church planning people said I got to stop doing that because people were only coming for the food. And he and I talked, I said, well, I think that's hogwash. I said, because I know churches are getting planted and they're spending $50,000 on a light system. I know a bunch of churches that are spending $80,000 on a PA system. I know churches that are spending $150,000 on a playground. So it's okay for the white churches to do that, but it ain't okay for the black churches to feed people. So we got into this little, back and forth about that. And I said, I think you should just go back. How much was it? He goes, well, we're on appropriations, which means the denomination was kind of funding him a little bit of money. I said, were you spending any of that money on this food? He goes, no, we were covering the food. I said, I'd go back to serving the food. He says, yeah, because we stopped serving the meals and immediately all our numbers plummeted, right? He says, we went from like 120, 130 people every week down to like 50. He says, I'll never forget the first Sunday, some line of me, he goes, we were a church that was so poor, people brought their own lawn chairs. They didn't have a chair to sit in. So a couple of mamas of the church came, they sat in the front row, put their lawn chairs out, and they knew something was wrong because they weren't smelling chicken before service began. And they said, what's wrong? They said, yeah, we're not doing the chicken anymore. She said, before we even started church, they packed up their lawn chairs, headed for the back door, and as they're walking out, we heard them say, ain't got no food today. Ain't got no food today, might as well go home. Right? Was it wrong for them to serve chicken to a poor neighborhood so people would come, maybe hear about Jesus? Me, I'd be like, serve the chicken, right? If a white church can put in an $80,000 sound system and light system, you can serve free chicken you're getting from a famous restaurant in Kentucky. I would think that. Right? But that's just me, because I'm kind of like, I understand there's things people do because they're saying, if no one's here to hear the message, what good is it to give the message? Right? That's what we did downtown. We're downtown in this great big building that seats 250 people, and I've got 20 members, 30 drunks, and 4 dogs. It ain't working. No one's coming to hear what we have to say. Oh, and by the way, when I lead worship and stuff and preach the sermons, it's the same. It's the same music and the same sermons I've done before and all that kind of thing. And people go, oh, wow, I really like Gathering House. The services are so cool. I'm like, yeah, they were cool downtown too, but nobody was coming. Right? Same music, same sermons. Kind of get amen, Brian, down there. You down there, yeah. We're banging away on the guitars and just trying to get... Now, there was a season we didn't have heat in the building in the winter, and that might have been a bit of a dampener. It was hard to play guitar when your fingers were freezing, but we were in there, right? And so trying to figure all this out, but you know what? No one would come. So we decided that let's do something different. Let's build a church where we can still love on people, but create something that maybe folks would want to come to. And over the course of the dialogue, we had this whole strategy, we had this whole plan of how things were going to work, and we said, well, instead of just openly feeding all the poor people that are down in the neighborhood on 2nd Division, there's 150, 200 street people who came and got a meal every week. We said, let's figure out a way that we'll let Union Gospel Mission and Salvation Army and Catholic Charities handle that strata. But I know these people enough now that when they get into a system and they get clean and sober and they end up in a divey little apartment, they're living on food stamps, they're stuck. And there's nowhere for them to be handed up to. What if we took the square footage of the church and we did something different? What if instead of sitting empty all week long waiting around for Sundays to fill it with our great music and our great sermons, because it wasn't working down there for sure, what if instead we built a church that could be used 6 days a week and stuff could happen in it? What if we could change lives through a job training program? When we came, we sold everything, we decided, well, let's sell a building and build this out. And since we built this coffee shop out, I can say that the number one thing that has brought people to our church is this coffee shop. How many of you first set foot in the coffee shop? How many of you first set foot in the coffee shop? Yeah. How many of you first set foot in a church service? Right? How many of you aren't here at all? Because you're not raising your hand for either of those things, and so I know you're lying about something. Okay. So it's been interesting because over and over and over, when we first opened, we just thought, okay, we'll just kind of create this little hub in the community and people will come to it. And over and over and over, we would realize that people would come to the coffee shop and say, this is a church? Tell me about the church. And we still have those conversations. The number one thing, by far, that was growing our church was the weekly coffee shop type meetings and the folks who were coming in. The number one thing by far that's been killing our coffee shop financially is the word church on the outside of the building. Gathering House, it says on that sign out there, Covenant Church and Cafe, which I didn't think much of. I thought, Gathering House, Covenant Church is our denomination, but it's a cafe. People will come to that. 2 years later, I find that message is confusing to people. 2 years later, I've got people who are atheists who said, oh, I would have never set foot in there, but after they've come in, they've loved it, right? We've got a few of the bar owners in the neighborhood who recently came in for a quick meeting that they had to do with somebody, and they were astounded at how cool this place was. But because they were super atheists, they said, I would have never walked in here had someone not brought me. Never would have set foot in. We get people drive by all the time, and then later on they'll say, I saw what you guys were, but I couldn't figure it out, and I thought your coffee shop was only open on Sundays. So I didn't ever bother to come in, right? In the meantime, a bunch of other people are coming in all the time, and we're getting this all the time. It's like the word Covenant Church on the outside prevents people from coming in. Once they're in, they love it. They think it's fantastic, and usually they say, wow, this can't be a typical church. What time are your services? I get that all the time. Some of you sitting here are here from having had that conversation. I know. Give me an amen if that's you, right? Should we remove that tagline from the signs if it prevents people from coming in? We wrestle with that. Right now, we wrestle with that. It's like, should we remove the barrier that keeps people from coming to us? When the Apostle Paul was in Athens in Acts 17, we'll study this as we're going through the book of Acts. It's interesting. He's with the Athenian philosophers, the greatest minds of the day. He preaches an entire sermon in Acts 17 and never once quotes the Bible to them. Why? They didn't know the Bible. They didn't understand the Old Testament. He used what they knew. He preaches a whole sermon out of a statue he saw in the middle of Athens to an unknown God. And he preached that God to them. So our leadership, we sit and we wrestle with, would more people just wander in here if we just didn't have the tagline? It just simply said the Gathering House on the sign outside. We'd still be who we are, do what we do, have our wall, be our church. Would more people come? Would that be right? And another side of the coin on that is, I hate baiting and switching people, right? Why can't we just say who we are and be what we are and just say we're a church? It's like, we don't want to make people come in and say, ha ha, surprise, we snuck one in on you, we are a church. We don't want to do that either, right? And so we have wrestled with what's right. There's a bunch of ladies who work in the sewing shop down the block. None of them will come in here ever once for a cup of coffee because they're afraid they're going to get preached at, and they've told me so. And I've said, and they're a bunch of sweet little old ladies, really nice, and I've said, well, come, no one will preach at you, just come on in. No, they're not going to risk it. Right? So we wrestle as leaders with this whole issue of the indirect touch of the Holy Spirit of God to get a message across. What is right? What is wrong? Is removing a tagline that keeps people away wrong? Is feeding poor people fried chicken you're getting for free wrong? What is right? What is wrong? The lines seem to get blurred, don't they? They seem a little bit gray at certain times. We can't figure all the things out. And we wrestle with what we want to do and be as a church because we knew when we moved here we had a vision. And the vision was, let's create a coffee shop. And the coffee shop will be a great hangout in the neighborhood. And people walk in here, we'll befriend them, we'll hear what's going on in the lives of the people in our neighborhood. They'll hear about us, we'll get to know you relationally. And after we've gotten to know you relationally, we'll be able to say, oh, come to church if you want. That was kind of the strategy. And while we're doing that, we'll take people who are coming out of drug culture or coming out of poverty culture or coming out of a jail or prison life or that kind of things, give them a chance to get a job and earn a living doing something, being a barista and selling muffins and bagels and that kind of thing as we have this cool hangout coffee shop. That was our vision. We had a downtown building that was going to sell for $1 million. And it turned out that the people buying it say, we can't actually buy your building for $1 million. We can give you 20% down, and over the next 2 years we'll make payments on it. At the end of 2 years, we'll make a big balloon payment that would be somewhere around $900,000. So it turned out, as we prepared to plan our coffee shop and build a different kind of church that could be used 6 days a week doing something else, we actually didn't have the money to do it. It's like we ran out of money building this thing. And so in the end, we're like, well, how are we going to get a coffee shop open when we're under construction? And since we'd been feeding people downtown for a while, we'd started a separate 501c3. We'd started a separate nonprofit corporation down there because we're feeding poor people every week, 150 to 200 poor people every single Sunday. And it turned out that those meals were costing us about $30,000 a year for all that we were doing. And we had to raise that $30,000 outside of our church because we would get coins in the offering. We'd have an offering, they passed the plate. We were lucky we got $100. I remember a couple of times Bill Richards and Bill Davis kicked in $10 so the offering could be $100. And I think our monthly budget was $14,000 a month. Right? Shoot, we had a utility bill of $2,000 a month. And pass the plate to take the offering, because that is how churches make their money, by the way, the plate that gets passed, that's it. So we'd pass the plate and wouldn't even make $100. We had a $2,000 utility bill. Right? Times were hard. Trying to figure that out. So we started a separate 501c3 corporation because corporations can't give to a church. And a bunch of places said, we would love to support those meals. We would love to do something about that. We would love to donate to that, but see, our rules and our corporation prevent us from doing it. So we started a separate 501c3, and we got that kind of rolling called Streetwise so that we could get dollars from corporations. So like Wandermere Real Estate would fund us, and they did. Right? We would get places like that who would give us money so we could feed the poor downtown. And then when we arrived here, like, well, we're broke, we're out of money. But we happen to have this second corporation called Streetwise that can raise money outside the church coffers from business people and from other entities, like Catholic Charities. So Catholic Charities gave us some money to finish building the building, kind of funneled it through Streetwise. And we asked Streetwise, will you run the coffee shop for us? We'll get this thing going. And foolish me, I'm thinking, how tough can it be, right, to sell coffee, bagels, and muffins? Make $300 or $400 a day. Your rent's free because the church is going to cover that. We'll be good to go. And we're going to see Jesus going on in here, Jesus stuff going on. Well, 2 years later, it never really makes money. Right? It doesn't make money. And a year ago, we said, well, we're going to have food. Everybody came in and says, let's do food. We're like, well, it's better job training, too. Let's do that. So we introduced food, and that was last August, and we've been through 3 or 4 different managers trying to get that thing going. Ran it all the way to April and said, yeah, we were losing money when we were coffee and bagels. Now we're losing more money. So maybe we should just quit that. And so someone ended, and in April, we decided we were just let's just not do food either. Let's just go back to coffee and bagels and figure out what we're doing here. But in the meantime, what's really interesting, what's fascinating are all the conversations that have taken place. Like last Thursday night, we were downtown at the Lincoln Center, some of us in the room, Celebrating Family Promise. They're an organization that rescues intact homeless families, moms, dads, kids, and they put them up in churches in different neighborhoods for a week at a time. They stay in a church. During the day, they leave the church. They go to a day center. They come back to that church at night. They spend the night in the church building, like sometimes in the gymnasium, sometimes in rooms that they have all decked out. And then different church people will come, and they'll give them a meal for that night. And they'll be like, well, how many people do you need to get? Meal for 20. Somebody bring enough food for 20 people. And some people in our church do that. When our turn comes up, because they stay up here at the North Hill Red Church right there on Wellesley, and people in our church, we will do meals, and we'll take them up there and spend the night and stay with them or just feed the meal or whatever. So we've been very heavily networked with Family Promise for a long time. And their director comes here all the time. His second office is that corner window right there, where you see Chuck sitting one stall over, right there. That's where Steve Allen sits, and he's probably there 3 days a week working on a laptop. And so we have all these ministries that are going on here, and about 2 weeks ago, at this table where you go, or Lisa and her friends are, right over here, a bunch of business guys from International Assistance Partners were sitting there. Bankers, lawyers, real estate guys, high-powered businessmen. And they run a program where they actually collect a lot of finance dollars and they support micro-business enterprises in the third world. A year ago, they tried to launch a food truck in partnership with us to put a world relief refugee in a business out back on our parking lot. And so we were doing this together, working with IAP. They funded it. We were the host place, and all kind of ended. It fell apart. And so we talked about relaunching it this spring. And so I'm sitting at that table talking to these bankers and lawyers, and they're staring at the table, and they're all gloomy. I'm like, what's wrong? They're like, we've got $40,000, $50,000 worth of equipment, investments. We have this food truck trailer. We have everything. We have the menus done. We have talked to the health department. We have everything ready to go. And World Relief doesn't have anyone to send us to operate this. We're ready to hand the operational business to somebody and train them how to do it. And World Relief doesn't have anybody to give us. Because, I don't know if you heard about it, but there's been a little slowdown in the immigration world. So I'm sitting there and I said, well, would you guys like just maybe this person who's been in prison? I know some. Or would you, I got some friends. or what about just a poor family? And they're like, yeah, we'd take, if there's a poor family who you know that's homeless and they'd like to try. So I say, just give me a second. I get up out of that chair right there and I walk over to that corner. And I say, Steve, you know these guys over here? No, I never met them at all. I asked a couple of guys, have you ever heard of Family Promise? One guy, I've heard of it, but I don't know anything about it. So I walk over that corner and say, Steve, there's a group of business guys sitting at that table right over there. They got about $50,000 operation, a food truck, ready to launch with an underprivileged, impoverished person that they would like to help start a business, and they'll coach them and guide them through it. Do you have anybody at Family Promise? He goes, oh my God, I got this woman from Guatemala. And she's been cooking the food for all of us, and her dream is to open a restaurant. I say, come over here, let me introduce you to some guys. Right? And so those conversations are now starting to really roll. Is that Jesus? Is that Jesus? Is that what we said we wanted to do? We knew as a church that churches are great at taking care of people's emotional needs, spiritual needs, and social needs. But when it comes to their economic needs, we usually are dead in the water. We don't do anything. We just wanted to kick the church up one more notch and say, we want to help people socially, spiritually, psychologically, and economically. So if we can help them in their economics, let's do it. And this place has become a hub. So we're at the Family Promise thing Thursday night, Tanya and I, and Carol's are down there with us, and we're down there kind of celebrating Family Promise at this big fundraiser thing. We walk into this room, and there's probably 300, 400 people sitting there, right? And we're walking around, and Tanya are like, I know a fourth of the faces in this room. We knew, there wasn't hardly a table we didn't know somebody. How do we know them? From this coffee shop. We're looking around like, look at all these people, all these faces. How do you know them? They hang out in our church. All these people doing incredible ministry are hanging out in our church all the time. And then we're finding ourselves getting introduced, like evidently knowing people at the Gathering House is somebody to know. So we're getting introduced a lot to even more people, and big thriving financial banker guy wants to come in here and hang out with us. And it was a really interesting kind of experience where and what was funny is because when you walk around with my wife at things like that and we see all these faces, she knows them, but she doesn't know their names. And she can't introduce them socially appropriately by their drink. Hi, this is a vanilla almond latte. It's my husband, Rob. It doesn't really work, right? Rob, I would like you to meet Mocha. Right? So we're walking around having that experience, aren't we? Yeah. But it was amazing to me. I thought, how did the Gathering House become such a hub of the ministry that God's doing in the community? How did that happen? It happened because we risked it all to build a coffee shop. We said, let's build a coffee shop that's open all the time. And Jesus is using it, and stuff is happening. And it's pretty exciting. And then when you hear stuff like Nikki's story, and Brenda's story, and the stories of other people, you know, the guys we have. We've got a great janitor guy who will come in this afternoon. He spent 27 years in prison. He's been out about 4 months. Right? We like Don a ton. A ton, man. But you got to admit it. A guy went into prison when there were no cell phones. People didn't have home computers, and there were no ATM machines. I mean, he's coming out, restarting life from like, wow, I'm in another universe. And you know what? No one would give him a chance. Gathering House would give him a chance. You know, we'd say, we'll give you a chance. We like him a ton. If you see him, you know, later on, you make sure you say hi to Don. So here's the whole thing. We're like, okay, it's cool. God's using it. Relationships happen. A couple months ago, I did a whole sermon series where I looked at the different agencies, groups, ministries, and stuff that use our building. 42 different groups use our building all the time. Some Christian, some not. Our only rule was family friendly. I found out one of the things that was interesting because we have a low counter over there and big wide aisles to get in and out of the bathrooms. We're the only coffee shop in Spokane outside of the service station where 3 guys in a wheelchair can meet for coffee. Us and service station. That's it. So they come here all the time because there's 3 guys in wheelchairs who can sit in our church and get a cup of coffee on a Tuesday afternoon. And then their little group grew to more, and now they rent a room in the back and they do a Bible study every Friday with about 14 of them, I think. Right? And they don't attend our church. Is that okay? Yeah. Is that what we set out to do? Yeah. Is Jesus doing that stuff? Yes, He is. Are we going to let Jesus do it? Absolutely. Yes, we are. And the whole thing is, we got one problem. How do we make that thing work financially? Dang it. And so we said, at the beginning of April, we were talking about, why don't we just have Streetwise stop doing it and farm it out? Why don't we let somebody else do it, right? So I called Catholic Charities. You guys want to do it? Leaf Bakery want it? No. Call Union Gospel Mission. You guys got a culinary school. You guys want to do a retail outlet? No, we're so far behind in that we can't. All right, let's call a few other people and see what we can get going. Maybe there's a restaurateur who'd want to do it because I don't know how we're going to do it. So our manager leaves. Tanya sort of takes over doing the food part. And we're losing money, and suddenly the gap went, shoot, we didn't lose near as much money over the last 4 weeks. Like, hey, what's going on? It's calmer. Things are cool. So we sit down with a guy. His name's Frank. And Frank, we're sitting right over there, about where Alyssa's sitting, behind the couch. We're sitting over there with Frank about 2 weeks ago. I met Frank because he's a big corporate executive chef where he oversees a chain of like 10, 15 restaurants in town, really high-end restaurants, and a whole corporation owns all of them, and he was the executive chef for all of them. He was leaving that job to either A, start his own restaurant, or B, was in the middle of negotiating taking over all the food services of Northern Quest Casino. So, he's a true chef, right? He's a high-end guy. I met him because downtown, when we were working with the homeless, one of our favorite homeless street guys who'd gone to Union Gospel Mission, ended up getting his life together. His name was Dean. We loved Dean a ton. And Dean, about 2 years later, threw a party for everyone who had ever helped him. Frank's wife works at Union Gospel Mission, and she taught Dean how to read and write because he couldn't read and write very well. And we were the church he hung out in. And so he throws this party where he's going to celebrate everybody who helped him. I go to this barbecue, and I meet Frank, who's sitting at the table across from me at this barbecue, celebrating how we both helped Dean, and I didn't know him at the time. And I figure, this is a guy to know. So Frank and I exchange cards. And then I hear that he might be interested in a restaurant, so Frank, come on up and talk to us. He sits down, he goes over everything, looks over all our stuff, loves what we have here. We're like, Frank, you want to do it? And he sits down, and he goes, I'm going to tell you something. He says, you have Jesus doing some really cool stuff here. Any restaurant person who came in here to take over your operation so that you could just focus on ministry, anyone who did that would want control of this whole building, the hours of operation, and when things would happen. So like when you guys close early on Good Friday, so you can set this up for your Good Friday service. A restaurant guy, if he takes over, he won't let you do that. He'll want to be open on his hours, on his terms, and a lot of the Jesus stuff you have happening will stop happening. And I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, we didn't put in $600,000 into this building so some other restaurant guy could come along and make a living off it, did we? No. And then Frank says to us, something I hadn't thought of. He says, the food at Northern Quest casinos doesn't make money. I'm like, what? You got all those big restaurants out there? He goes, no. They barely break even on their food. It's an amenity to get people to come out there. Why doesn't your church just understand this is an amenity to get people to come in the doors? Why don't you just say, there's churches that are financing youth groups at $2,000, $3,000 a month. Why don't your church just say, this is worth it to us? Whether or not it makes money, it's worth it to us because so much Jesus stuff happens because we have it. And I'm like, that's the executive chef of Northern Quest Casino giving me ministry advice? Is that what's going on here? Right? I don't know where to put that one, right? But he's an incredible Christian man. I had been thinking about that, like, is it worth it? Should churches do that? Should we do that? And right now our leadership and our congregation's wrestling with, should we do it? Now, I would have told you that 5 months ago, out of the question. Can't do it because we weren't making any money as a church ourselves. The plate that passes, the baskets that pass everything. Yeah, our whole church depends on you putting something in that basket or it all goes away, right? And so a few months back we did a sermon on giving, and we've been, I don't know, Bill's not here, but we're down about $8,000 a month was common giving for us, 8 or 9, and our costs were $12,000 to $13,000 a month. So all through the fall and last summer, and the spring before, and the fall before that, we were losing money and living on some savings, right? I did that sermon, and since that time, things have grown and grown. And I think you guys gave $14,000 in March, and you guys gave $18,000 in April. Now, I was in a poor church downtown for so long that my first reaction was I go to our treasurer, Bill Davis, I say, Bill, did somebody give a big check of $5,000 or $8,000? Come on. And that's a one-time shot, and he goes, no. It was all the regular people who attend our church just suddenly saying, this place is worth it, and I'm going to give to it. I'm going to give to all that Jesus is doing here. And then we're looking at so if the church just kept giving the way they're giving and doing what we're doing, we could just simply say, take all the pressure off of whether we farm that out or make money. Hey, we went as far as to calling food truck associations about renting it out to commissary food trucks. Right? I mean, that's how far we've come to say, how do we make money at the thing so that we can do ministry? And Frank's sitting here, the casino guy, is telling me, don't worry about that. Let your people worry about that. You guys just do the ministry. They'll figure it out. Right? So this is kind of where we're at as a church. We believe in what Jesus is doing here. We believe in the stuff that's happening here. And it's funny because Jesus does stuff I don't understand. 2 Fridays ago, the Center for Service Learning Project people with the Department of Health and Human Services, they come up here with 10 or 12 mentally disabled, physically disabled adults. Once or twice a month. They like to come. They bring a whole van full. They like to come up here because we're a safe place for their people to be. They're 2 young 20-something or others who are running that, kind of oversee them. Well, last Friday they brought like 40 people to come and hang out in our coffee shop. We're like, why do you do that? They're like, because all those people need to get out in life and go to a place that they feel safe, and it's kind of an environment they're happy in, and your place feels safe. So we come here. We come to your church coffee shop, your church, your place, and do that. We have businessmen telling us all the time, those rooms you have back there, I'd rent them. I'd do my business meetings back there. I would rent your rooms. We make about $1,000 a month off renting the back rooms, by the way, at $25 for 3 hours and $50 for 3 hours. Right? We're making $1,000 a month off renting rooms back there. But we have businessmen tell us all the time, if my clients come to a building that says church on the outside, they won't walk in. If you took the tagline off your signs, I'd book more of those rooms. I'd have a lot of clients who would come in here. You could keep all your stuff on the inside. They'd see it's a church because most of these business guys are Christians. They say once they've been inside and see that, they'd probably attend your church. Is that worth it? This is what we wrestle with. It's a wrestling match, right? Is it worth it? Should we do that? Right? These are the kind of the things that we as leaders are like, God, this isn't just normal. It's not normal kind of thinking about church. Every church I've been in, and I've been in 6, 7 different churches as a paid staff person. Every church I've ever been in, we would sit in staff meetings, and a number one topic would be, how do we get people to come in these doors? What are we going to do on Mother's Day to get more moms and families to walk in here? What are we going to do on Father's Day? What's the big thing we're going to do at Christmas or at Easter to get people to come in here? Because we need more people to walk in the doors of the church so that we can tell them about Jesus. In my entire life, 56 years now, a couple weeks ago, I've never been in a church that had the opposite problem. Oh, we get people who come into our church all the time. Getting people to come into our church, not really the hassle. Figuring out how to connect the church to those people. That's where our issue is. Figuring out how do we do ministry out of that group. 2 Fridays ago, maybe 3, was it Saturday we had Gonzaga Day? All the Gonzaga students were in here. Gonzaga jazz bands playing and all that kind of thing. The room was packed. We had to bring every chair out of the closet, just like this, packed. Windows to wall, packed with Gonzaga students who'd never been in here before. And they loved it. And I must have had the conversation, well, actually, you're sitting in our church. Actually, we have students in here on Sunday, and did that whole spiel. And they were like, oh, well, you should have told us this in September because school's out next week. Right? I'll be back. I'll be back. I'll be back. And what I wished on Gonzaga Day was there just weren't enough of us church people representing. Right? Weren't enough of us in the mix with them. I'm loving what God's doing here. Jesus is the center. Yeah, we could strip all this down to nothing. Just have a guitar and sit on a stool on a guitar. And I've done that. I'm sitting here because my knee's still blown. Right? Sitting here just thinking about what does Jesus want to do with us? What's our future? Right? And we know that what God's doing here and who He's working with people and some stories that keep emerging out of our coffee shop that are phenomenal. What God's doing connecting business people who are going to do economic development with impoverished people. What God is doing here is phenomenal. All the time I'm like, God, you are doing stuff here. It's like, Jesus, you own this hub, and it is an incredible hub. To walk into the Lincoln Center and see 300-400 people and know a fourth of the room because they've been in this hub of ministry, this room right here, that you people helped build. That you people cared about. And some of you, I know you're kind of new to it. You're like, well, not me. You're not counting me. And hey, we still got a long way to get a future unraveled. You can be part of it. Right? What does Jesus want to do? Because there's a message going out that church is a negative thing. Church is hated. The word church is awful to people. Something has happened in our society. There's been a twisting and a turning where that institution of comfort and peace, the institution of where you went in a time of crisis was church, has turned into something else in our society. Has turned into stay away from there. Those people won't care. They won't help you. They're all about themselves. That's how people are perceiving church nowadays. And we just wanted to be a place that's something a little different. We want to be a place that says, you come on in, broken as you are, hurt as you are, whatever's going on in your life. You get to start from where you start. And we'll just introduce you to someone that we think you would really like to know because we know He really wants to meet you. And His name is Jesus Christ. And He will rock your world. And He will change everything about you if you let Him. So on this fine Mother's Day, we're just doing this sermon to kind of tell you, this is who we are. This is what we do. This is what we're about. If in your life you're like, I'm kind of looking for a church. I want to be a part of a group of people who are doing something. This is us. If you're like, yeah, I don't fit what you guys are doing. Hey, there's 900 other churches out there. Find a good one that would fit for you. But this is who we want to be. This is what the destiny we're on and the road we're going on. And we will admit, we don't know everything. We're figuring out as we go. We make mistakes along the way. We ask you to give us grace when we screw up. And we give you grace when you screw up. And together we'll kind of fumble through life because the only one who's really in charge of everything is Jesus Christ. We trust in Him. We believe in Him. That's who we are as a gathering house. Would you stand with me as we just close in prayer? Lord God Almighty, King of the universe, Jesus Christ, King of kings and Lord of lords, the one who holds all this universe together in your hands. We are here to dedicate ourselves to knowing who you are. And as we know who you are, we share more and more and more about you with people who have not met you yet, or with people who have met you but haven't discovered pieces of you or aspects of you yet that they desperately need to know. They may not yet know you as comforter. They may not yet know you as a source of joy. They may not yet know you as the one who will hang on to them in the storms. And so, Lord, we pray that you would use us to indirectly, by the power of your Holy Spirit, affect others for your kingdom, for your glory, and for the knowledge of you. May you fill this house and may you unite us together, intent on one purpose, intent on one thing. And Lord, where we mess up, forgive us, knit us back together again, heal us, make us whole. And let us continue forever striving towards who you are. And Lord, collectively as a group, we just keep submitting this place to you. Say, Lord, show us what's next. Tell us what you want to do next. We ask this in your most holy and wonderful name. Amen.